She walked in, confident, despite the judgmental stares. An agent sneered, "This isn't for you." She was about to leave, but instead, she left a promise. What happened next shook the industry to its core. But let's start from the beginning. Sophia Washington had worked tirelessly for years, saving every penny to buy her first luxury condo in Manhattan. She had a clear vision of what she wanted, and today was the day she would make that dream a reality. With her polished resume in hand, she walked into Drew Collier's sleek office, confident that her hard work would be recognized. But from the moment Drew looked her up and down, his attitude shifted. His eyes barely grazed her resume as he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. "Sorry, ma'am. I think you're looking for something more affordable," he said, his tone oozing condescension. Sophia's heart dropped, the sting of his words hitting her harder than she expected. She had heard stories of discrimination in the industry, but to feel it firsthand, to be judged on something as superficial as her appearance, was beyond frustrating. The door to her dreams slammed shut in that instant, but not for the reasons Drew thought. Rather than losing her temper or arguing, Sophia turned on her heel and walked out of the office. Humiliated, yes, but her resolve only grew stronger. She refused to let this moment define her, to let Drew's ignorance stop her. She knew her worth, her intelligence, her ambition, and her drive were undeniable. No one, especially someone like Drew, was going to take that away. As the door closed behind her, Sophia made herself a promise. She would return, not for approval or validation, but to prove that no matter what obstacles stood in her way, no matter the prejudice or discrimination, she was going to own a piece of the Manhattan skyline. Drew's judgment would be nothing but a fleeting moment in her rise. Drew had almost forgotten about Sophia's visit. He continued to focus on his high-end clientele, the multi-million-dollar sales that came easy for him. The success, the deals, the luxury, everything felt effortless. But as the days went by, something about Sophia lingered in his mind. Her quiet defiance, the way she left his office without a word of anger or confrontation, struck him in a way he couldn't shake. It was unlike anything he had encountered before. Sophia's refusal to back down gnawed at him, her calm strength unsettling in a way he wasn't prepared for. He had written her off, thinking she was nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. But the image of her, standing in front of him, holding her head high, her eyes filled with resolve, kept playing on repeat. Then, a month later, the door to his office swung open again. This time, Sophia wasn't alone. She was flanked by a lawyer and a steely confidence that seemed to fill the room. She stepped forward, holding out her documents, her credit score, financial statements, all proof that she was more than capable of making the purchase. "I want that penthouse," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. There was no hesitation, no request for approval, only demand. Drew couldn't help but sneer. He dismissed her once again, his words sharp with disdain. "You're wasting your time. That property isn't for someone like you." But Sophia didn't flinch. Her resolve hardened. Drew's judgment, his condescension, only fueled her determination. She didn't just want the penthouse. She wanted it as a statement to him, to the world, to everyone who ever doubted her because of her skin color. As Drew turned away, unaware of the storm brewing behind him, Sophia made a decision. She would buy that building, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked or underestimated. In the weeks that followed, Sophia moved with relentless focus. She wasn't just going to prove Drew wrong. She was going to crush every doubt, every sneer, every whisper. She set out to conquer the very real estate world that had once seemed so distant, so inaccessible. Sophia knew how to leverage her network, and she did it brilliantly. She reached out to investors, forged connections with industry leaders, and pieced together a deal so bold it left even the most seasoned brokers in awe. Drew, on the other hand, had no idea that his world was about to be upended. He continued his usual routine, oblivious to the storm gathering just outside his field of vision. He had forgotten about Sophia, or so he thought. The penthouse he had so callously dismissed was slipping from his grasp, a casualty of his own arrogance. Then, one evening, as Drew walked past the very building he had deemed unworthy of someone like Sophia, he froze. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the Manhattan skyline. And there, on the facade of the building, was a massive sign, glowing in gold letters. Washington Tower, a building by Sophia Washington. The irony hit Drew like a punch to the gut. He couldn't believe his eyes. The woman he had turned away had not only bought the building, but she had named it after herself. His mistake was now emblazoned in the city's skyline for all to see. It wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of everything Drew had gotten wrong. His stomach twisted with a sharp pang of shame. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a statement. Sophia's name stood tall above the city, a reminder of her success, her resilience, and Drew's own bitter failure. Sophia stood before Washington Tower, the wind tousling her hair as she gazed up at the glowing letters of her name in bold gold. Washington Tower. The skyscraper seemed to pulse with the energy of her accomplishment. Each floor, every inch of the gleaming building was now a symbol of her relentless perseverance, a monument to the years she had spent proving herself in an industry that hadn't always welcomed her. She wasn't just a success story. She was a living, breathing testament to the power of resilience and defiance against prejudice. For so long, she had felt the weight of society's doubts pressed down on her, especially the dismissive glance of Drew Collier, the man who had looked at her and saw nothing but the color of her skin. His rejection had been harsh, but it had never broken her. Instead, it had ignited a fire within her that refused to die. Now, as she stood there, it wasn't just about proving Drew wrong. It was about showing the world that no one, no matter their assumptions, could ever hold her back. She had claimed her place in this city, in this world. As if summoned by fate, Drew walked by. He was in his usual tailored suit, the same confident swagger in his step that had once made him feel untouchable. But today, something was different. As he neared the building, his eyes lifted, and for a split second, they locked with Sophia's. His steps faltered. He froze. For a moment, it felt like time itself had paused. The familiar arrogance in his face was replaced by something more foreign, something that Sophia had never seen before, a flicker of shame. His eyes darted to her name, the weight of her success sinking in with the heavy realization that the woman he had once dismissed had outdone him, had done what he had doubted she could. The silence between them was thick, charged with 1,000 unspoken words. Sophia didn't need to say a thing. She simply stood there, calm and collected, letting the towering presence of the Washington Tower speak for her. It was a resounding statement. The name that now graced the building was her victory, a justice all its own. It was proof that success doesn't bow to prejudice, that no barrier is too high when you have the will to rise above it. Drew, on the other hand, was left with nothing but his own regret. The arrogance that had once been his shield now felt like a burden too heavy to carry. The building loomed over him, a permanent reminder of his failure to see the woman before him for who she truly was. Powerful, driven, and unstoppable. It was a cruel irony. In underestimating Sophia, he had built her legacy for her. As Sophia stood in the shadow of her triumph, she knew that no one, not even Drew, could take this from her. She had proven what she had always known, that no matter how many obstacles were placed in her path, no one could ever stop her from reaching the top. Drew, however, would have to live with the consequences of his own arrogance, a fate far worse than any defeat.